We're live. All right. Thanks, guys. Welcome. Good to see you both. George from Prospero AI and Dennis Dick from Benzinga's Pre-Market Prep and a very accomplished trader in his own rights. Good to see you both. How are you doing?
We're doing okay. Doing okay.
Yeah.
It's not a bad day for me. It's one of those days that I'm smiling all day because I've been a Tesla bull here for a while. I'm one of those that drank the Elon Musk Kool-Aid, and I've been talking on my own show, their pre-market prep, for a long time about Tesla. So feeling pretty good about today. It is the biggest position of my long-term portfolio. So today is a good day. Tomorrow,
Today's a
who
good
knows what
day.
Elon
All
Musk
right.
is going to say, and maybe it goes right back down. But I've always said the biggest risk to the Tesla thesis, in my opinion, is what Elon Musk might say next.
Yeah, it's a good thing
I
X
played
doesn't
Tesla a
trade
little
publicly
bit.
anymore.
I was not in it in either of my portfolios today, but I hung on to some stocks. I had Upstart and ASTS in my like smaller high conviction portfolio, and they were down big yesterday. And I was like looking at myself and saying like, "Hey, is it time to drop these?" But I was like, "No, it could just as easily swing the other way tomorrow." And that's I was right about that. You're not always right when you say that. But so I'm definitely in a better mood today than yesterday, but it's never great when the market is just behaving this erratically.
It's a
No.
swingers market. That's what this is.
A
This is a
swingers
swingers
market.
market here right now. I never realized that until you just said that, George. This is the swingers market. We swing down, we swing up, we swing down. Yeah, swingers
So
market.
some would say a swing trading market, but I like where you've
I
gone
like the
with it,
swingers
Dennis. The
market
swingers
better.
market. There you
Swingers
go.
sounds cooler.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I gotta say, it's getting a little spooky out there, and I think you can feel it in the air. This time of year, it's getting colder up here. Certainly, Dennis, as I'm
Yeah.
sure
Me,
you're
me and
feeling,
Dave in
right?
northern Canada here where we
Yeah.
freeze this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I got my Canadian uniform on, and it's
Roots.
yeah, all right. And luckily, I think for Dennis and I, not for you, George, so much, we're not being subjected to incessant political ads for the next 2 weeks, but I'm sure most of you who are listening are. And so, let's get before we get to election day, which we're going to have to talk about a bit. The last time we got together, it was almost exactly a month ago, September 25th, and that was right on the heels of the Fed's jumbo interest rate cut. Markets were surging. You both kind of struck a note of caution. We saw a sell-off that week.
Mhm.
Markets once again, after that surge, to new record highs. But now here we are again, swinging all over the place, right? This week, a 3-day market slide, pretty rough. And then boom, Tesla's earnings. And I'm not going to even pretend to understand why this particular earnings report has catalyzed the market as it has. Because if you look at it, you're like, okay, so they missed on revenue, they improved their margins a bit, and they guided, great. Okay, sure. Is his guidance ever worth anything? I mean, like,
Well,
what's going on here?
this is funny because I was trading it actively last night too. I hold a long-term position, but I also actively traded as well. And it popped like the 17 points on the guidance, probably because the bar was really low here. I mean, everybody was saying this is going to be a disaster. The stock
Yeah.
had leaked after the robo-taxi event. The stock, basically went into the print on the 1 month lows. So the bar was fairly low here. So I think on any type of like decent numbers, the stock was probably going to rally, which it did. But it was sitting up there for like an hour at like 2:30, 2:31. It's where it wanted to be. Then Musk started his conference call. And what Musk does best is talk up his stock. He's
Right.
really good at talking
I
up
mean,
his
but
stock.
how's the
And he
market
said
not
everything.
onto that?
You're listening to that call, and he's talking, robo taxis, and next year in a couple cities, and then 2 years from now, 2 million a year, and then he's talking 25 to 30%, moving up here, 25 to 30% growth. I'm like, I don't know where that's coming from because that's 12. But if he says 25 to 30, the algos don't care. They start going, buy. It says 235, 238, 240, 242. And then everybody in the media starts talking about it. Now it's 251. So that's kind of what happened is you had the Tesla pop on the low expectations, and then you had the Musk bump here. and it hasn't turned down, and it hasn't slowed down ever since. And then every analyst chasing this morning, 6 of them raising price targets, one
all these price
upgrade.
targets,
You know, we know analysts chase price, so that piles on here too. So that's how we got to 251. That's kind of the scenario.
Wait, are you sure it wasn't that Elon Musk didn't say that he was going to hold a raffle and give $1 million away every day to any new Tesla shareholders? I thought that's why the stock was doing well.
That I would actually buy more shares for that. If I'm going to get $1 million, that would be good. I'll buy some shares.
Yeah,
I'll
man.
participate in that raffle.
Maybe I'm mixing.
It may not be legal though.
It may not be legal. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just what I thought.
I mean, has the guy ever even come close to hitting a date? Like, what? How is what's going on? You know, how does the market not discount these kinds of claims so significantly?
I think that, and again, I'm a shareholder, and I've drank the Kool-Aid to a certain extent. I know he's not going to hit any of these timelines. You know, like I'm like, put it in. I say that pre-market prep, put it in like some account that you don't look at. It's going to be the worst ride of your life. It's going to be up and down and left and right and nauseating. But I think in the long run here, he's working on so many things that are like, you think about AI and you think about where Tesla's trying to take it, the end products that he's trying to create, whether he does it or not, or on the timelines that he does it, he's definitely not going to hit the timelines. But he's done so many amazing things, like, you know, even outside Tesla to SpaceX to obviously, you know, you just think about, you know, where he started PayPal. I mean, the guy keeps going until he accomplishes it. I think FSD is one of the most amazing things that I've ever witnessed in my lifetime. Like, you know, to watch, you know, to see a car being able to drive itself is just jaw-dropping. Like this, even though, yes, you know, you have to have an intervention every 300 miles right now. It's unbelievable.
That's only for Teslas, because, you know, lots of other cars don't need that, right? Their interventions, their miles per intervention is way higher, right? So
yeah, but again, so I've had this conversation too, and I've maybe went down and drank too much Elon Musk Kool-Aid.
Okay.
But Waymo is going to have a real difficult time scaling that. They're going to have a real difficult time because one, LiDAR and the whole thing. Do you want to buy a car, the big, you know, camera system on the top of it that just looks absolutely hideous? Two is it's geofenced. So as of right now, it's basically, think of, you know, Waymo, they're kind of driving on a track where they're like geofenced within that area.
This is not true of GM. I'm not talking Waymo. You know, like, so I will tell you this. I spent some time actually years ago working at General Motors, consulting for them and working with some of the folks in their autonomous driving division. I learned quite a bit about it. And even back then, they were geofenced in San Francisco and having a lot of success. This was years ago. Now it's starting to expand, and yeah, it uses LiDAR because that's really good technology, and it's really hard to imagine that these systems are going to be able to generalize without using more advanced technology. Just using like the optical tech, it's not going to get them there.
I don't know if it's not going to get them there, because think Tesla too was using LiDAR up till 2019. So Tesla, it's not like, you know, Musk wasn't with LiDAR. What he thought was it wasn't scalable and it wasn't the long-term solution. So I think the question is, can Musk do it with cameras only? If he can, that business is so scalable and the numbers, you know, would be astronomical to where he could, you know, take the stock. In a worst case scenario, Dave, why can't he just put LiDAR back on the cars? And then be there.
Because all of his entire AI platform is trained off of just imagery.
Recall all the old ones?
I don't think it's impossible to think that he can get there, though. So I mean, it's hard to argue with a guy that, you know, catches an 18-story rocket, you know, coming down. I mean, if anyone can do it, it's him. So this is a bet, and I agree with what Musk said on a conference call last quarter. What he said was, basically, if you're buying Tesla stock, you're betting on them solving FSD, or you're not. He's like, everything else is noise. If they solve FSD with cameras only, this stock is much higher than $251. If they don't, this stock could basically be back to, you know, normalized valuation. As a car company, it's probably worth $75 to $100. It's not a zero, though. Tesla Q has sailed. That ship has sailed. They had $2.5 billion in free cash flow. There's still people that are still going Tesla Q. That ship has sailed. Sorry, Tesla bears, but there's even Gordon Johnson, who is the eternal bear, has a $24 price target. He doesn't have a zero on Tesla anymore. Tesla Q is gone. So what Tesla is a car company with probably a valuation of $75 to $100 as a traditional car company, with a call option on FSD, humanoids, energy, and whatever the hell else the guy comes up with, because he's always thinking of other stuff. That's worth something. So I look at it when I was
It's a pretty pricey call option at the moment. You don't think?
Maybe at 251. So I've been buying it from 160. I bought 160. My average cost base is I think 185. So I'm looking, and when I was making the argument, I was like, in the mid 150s, I think there's a floor of 75 to 100, because we've got to also think, when you look at the valuation, say, well, Tesla's trading 92 times earnings. Well, these are trough earnings for Tesla too. The earnings were much higher 2 years ago. Why are they trough earnings? Because you've been in an interest rate cycle here that has been rising. People don't buy, and Tesla's still seen as a luxury car, even though they're going to come up with cheaper options. But people buy less cars. You're going to argue with me, General Motors not buying less cars, but people do buy less toys, and Tesla's still kind of seen as a toy, a nice luxury vehicle, really. People don't do that when interest rates, or people do less of that when interest rates are rising. With interest rates coming down, that environment helps Tesla as well. And then you go into the whole political arguments, we're supposed to stay, not sided. But I mean, there's a reason he's warming up to Trump, because if he thinks Trump can win, his whole regulatory environment for getting FSD approved becomes a lot easier. That path becomes more. So I don't think it's totally. Yeah, and George.
And I want to jump. I want to jump in because that's actually what I was going to say anyway. Which is that I was tracking some numbers on this because I've been pitching a few articles around DJT, and it relates to Tesla because I was actually looking at basically the Trump trade, right? Betting on the election, and if you look at DJT, it's trading at 1,350 EV to sales, right?
which is just a nothing number.
Yeah. Then you look at I was doing SoundHound AI, which is that's my classic okay, I think people are overvaluing it. Stop. Is at 32, right? Then you have Tesla sitting there at 7, and I give those numbers because I'm just I think some of this juice, if you want to play the Trump trade, Tesla is a great way to play the Trump trade for the exact reason that you're talking about. I don't see Musk is a very smart guy. He's very tactical. I do not think in a million years he's going to bat for Trump like this if he doesn't have some wink assurances on FSD rolling out. So in a roundabout way, I think everybody who's playing the Trump trade, maybe you want to think about getting out of DJT and playing Tesla. Because if you want to play the Trump trade, I think it is way better to play it in Tesla, because Tesla will go bonkers, I think, if Trump wins, and it's got much more downside protection than some other investments, or even betting the election, right? I see I was looking at the election markets, and someone was talking about wisdom of crowds with the elections, and this was one of the reasons I was starting to think of it was it's not wisdom of crowds, because the article that I read said that basically bets are better than polls because people have real money. And then I was like, well, if that's the case, why are they overvaluing DJT to the extent that they are? Those aren't rational real money bets. And also, if you look at the spreads between Kalshi and Polymarket, it's about 5% on that spread. So you're talking about, for people that understand markets, that's a lot of price uncertainty.
A lot of juice. A lot of juice.
A lot of juice. You want to arb that? Good luck arbing that, right?
Election. So yes, that is all to say, I think there's some, Trump trade happening in Tesla. And I think that is the smart way to to trade the election if you want to.
Mm. I think that's a really interesting point to make, George. So, and I could even see it going either way, right? Like you want to put bets on Kamala, again, do maybe a put on Tesla, right? Where your risk is very fixed. And those are not well, I mean, I don't know, it's probably pretty volatile. I haven't looked at Tesla puts, so they're probably pretty rich.
That's
But I don't know,
That's
yeah,
expensive.
it's an interesting point. So let's go on a complete and total tangent then for a sec, because you guys are markets guys, and George, you brought this up, and I think if you've been online at all, you've read about this idea that Polymarket, for example, is being driven by a very small set of very large trades to push Trump's odds in a particular direction, or to put large money on, as an election trade. Have you paid any attention to that? What do you think? Do you buy into this markets as a good predictor, or are they just very manipulatable and people are leveraging that?
Well, what is this about Polymarket and U.S. investors not being able to make bets on, like U.S. citizens not being able to make bets on it? Because I just found that out. I don't trade on these, election in Polymarket there. But to my understanding is they had some settlement or something a number of years ago, and there's no U.S. citizen being able to actually make a bet on Polymarket. Like,
really? I didn't even know that.
I didn't know it till a few days ago when I was researching, and I was like, well, this makes this Polymarket almost information. Like, we have a vote where only U.S. citizens can vote. Yet on this betting on Polymarket, there's no U.S. money into that. I'm like, are you no U.S. citizen being able to bet on that? I mean, I don't know how you give it much credibility then. I don't know. And if I'm wrong, chat, they can jump in on here, but I don't think I'm wrong. I can research that in the back, and George could give his thoughts too. But
yeah, I mean, for me, that's kind of at the core of my argument, where it's just like, I don't think that there's any wisdom in this. And I think it's kind of the opposite, right? I think, especially when you talk about crypto, there's a lot of benefits to Trump winning. And there's actually no reason, everybody wants to be on the winning team. There's actually no reason for those markets not to want to show strength in that to make the appearance that Trump's going to win, because that obviously helps people, vote. People want to vote for the winner. People will sit out the election if they think, if they're planning to vote on the opposite side, if they think that it's, more already decided. There's a lot to want to manage the perception. And yeah, I think that there's every reason for those people, like, to want to. But the second part is also just that, like, I don't think people can necessarily separate out what they want to happen and what they think will happen. And I think that's part of it. And I think that's why I give the DJT
totally
like multiple right there, right? The only reason it would trade at that multiple is people cannot separate out what they want to happen and what they think will happen. And I think that multiple is almost, and that's what I was kind of doing, is almost proof of that existing. Because honestly, even if he wins, that multiple is pretty unjustifiable.
Unreasonable. Yep. And Dennis, I think you're right on the Polymarket question. However, I can tell you, I'm not saying from personal experience, but yeah, using a VPN to circumvent those kinds of things is a very straightforward.
Yeah, they're saying that Polymarket is reviewing. So U.S. users are banned from using the platform, but now Polymarket is trying to tighten that up into the election. Is what I'm just seeing, headlines just from the last couple of days to try to make sure that there isn't U.S. users in there. But I just think it's messed up that there's, you got to bet on a U.S. election as a service, and no U.S. users can bet on it. It sounds like whatever results you're getting at Polymarket probably aren't actually what's happening out there. I mean, Polymarket looks like it's going to be a landslide for Trump. And I think it's probably a lot. I think Trump is ahead, but I think it's a lot closer than Polymarket would have you believe. That's just my opinion. Staying in the neutral area. I'm Canadian. I don't have a vote, so I'm neutral here.
The Economist.
I'm an American abroad. My vote doesn't count.
And that sounds about right. 55-45 Trump. That sounds about right to
Yeah,
me.
I
From
think
sounds
like
right to
I've
me too.
looked at many
That's fair.
different polls. I'm doing the math, but and also The Economist is pretty good about staying
You know,
center.
I think what people also, I think what it's hard for a lot of people to understand is like a 55-45 for Trump is almost indistinguishable from 60-40 odds for Kamala, right? Like these things are almost nearly identical. It's essentially a coin flip. It's like a slightly weighted coin flip. It's basically a coin flip, right? But of course, this is based on polling, and if there is a systematic polling error in one direction or the other, it's going to be like it could very well be a landslide, and we have no idea. So let's just think about that, and let's think about the hypothetical. Like what do you guys see the markets doing in a scenario in which Trump wins? Do you see markets rallying? Are they already rallying and incorporating these odds and expectations? Is there a concern if Kamala wins? And what about like if it's in the very likely outcome that it's a contested election and we don't know the answer for weeks potentially?
Lots of scenarios here.
Yeah.
The markets never like contested elections. So if we're like hinting at that, the markets probably fall on that. In 2016, when obviously Trump won, originally the markets tanked on that because we couldn't even get around the notion of Trump because it was going to be such a landslide for Hillary. It shows you how much the polls really aren't very good. Because if we go into 2016, the night of 2016, nobody had Trump winning. It was like 90% Hillary. Every site, every betting site, everything was like, and then Trump ended up winning. And the markets, the futures, I remember as he was winning, were just tanking because they couldn't even rationalize how, markets would function under a Trump presidency. And then they realized that no, Trump actually is pro-business. He's not a big taxer. He's probably corporate business. He's probably better for it. And that's when the markets blasted off. And then you have the whole thing of like Cramer was doing Trump stock, not Trump stock. So then you've got to separate it and say, well, which sectors benefit and which sectors don't? Obvious ones, drill, baby. If Trump wins, it's going to be good for the oil stocks. It's not going to be good for solar stocks. It's not going to be good for clean energy if Trump wins. So those are obviously, you can just start separating sectors and separating stocks. Just as much as George said, Tesla is a Trump stock. You've got solar, that is clearly Harris stocks. You've got oil, clearly Trump stocks. You have certain other spots, banking regulation maybe gets easier. Maybe you could put banks into the Trump sector. You can think about all those, regulatory. If you have easier regulation, well, what sectors are really affected by that? So you probably got to just break it down by sectors, what's good, what's bad. Some stocks are going to benefit. Some stocks are not going to benefit. I tend to think the stock market overall would probably rather have a Trump administration because it's easier on corporate business.
One thing that I'm interested. I mean, I really only think there's two scenarios. I mean, we all are pretty middle. This might seem to some not middle, but I mean, I think realistically we only have two scenarios, right? We have Trump winning, and then we have a somewhat contested election. Like I just don't see any way in which the votes are one way, and that there's not at least a desire to review them. Let's a strong desire by much of the country to review them, right? Let's be realistic and as empathetic as we can.
That's a nice way of putting it, George. Yeah.
Yes. And one thing that I'm actually like to bring it back to the market is like so I think to me that those two things we have, I think a bull market if Trump wins, the review situation is undoubtedly bearish, right? Is there anything we actually talked about a month ago? Like I was actually bullish on Coinbase and crypto, and so like the first time like I have that looks pretty good right now. going back a month, I've got to say I looked at that going into this, and I was like, the crypto George Bull one of one times. Actually, I also did
100% batting average. I like
that. Looking pretty good there. But I'm not sure there's like, with cryptocurrency being like one of the few things where I'm just like, I think that's one of the better ones because it's kind of like disaster, like we talked about yesterday. It's kind of a little disaster insurance. It'll do very well if Trump wins. Like, I'm not guaranteeing it'll do well, but like if I'm looking at the safest thing with upside in all this, I think it's Tesla or cryptocurrency.
Mhm.
But I'm even looking at like the crazy thing about this election. I want to kind of put this to like, kind of the more complex, like, is this even something that you could straddle, or just does the market know how much risk is priced into that already? And your
Mhm.
straddle's not going to do well because it will have to move so much
Yeah.
that it's not a good trade.
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know generally where options premiums at right now. Like, is there a lot of implied volatility
It's
at the
more of an
moment, market
intellectual
wide?
one.
There always is before the
How high
election.
would,
It's an
Yeah.
how
event.
low would they have to
Right. Like, what
be
kind
for
of
you
move
to
do you
feel
need?
like you
Yeah.
could straddle something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a
I
good
mean, we
question.
can price it out right now.
Yeah.
So
Let's
we
take
could
a
just
look.
go out. So election November 6th. So we go out on our options chain. If you want to just look at the S&P,
Yeah.
which is basically the most diversified vehicle out there, we'd have to go out. I'd got to go further to just bringing up those chains here.
Yeah, let's look at the S&P and then let's look at Tesla and Coinbase.
Yeah, well, they're going to be a lot more here. So bear with me while I'm just bringing it
Yeah.
up. So November, we're going to the November options because I'm all in the dailies here. So we got to
Yeah.
go up past. So we got to go to November, really, November the 8th to get past it, because November 5th and then November the 8th is the next strike. So we got to go out to say 580s, 8, 16, 16.50, $16 on the SPY. What is that? About 3.5%. About 3.5%. Doesn't seem crazy. That's a
No,
straddle.
that's
So
lower than I would have thought.
yeah, a little bit.
definitely.
But again, SPY is like the most diversified in ETF. I mean, we got Nvidia tanking, we got Tesla up 17% today, and SPY is
Yeah,
up 0.11.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
what's
SPY
going on?
is
What
like,
about the
if
cues?
something goes up, something else goes down. They all just have it all mixed, and it just doesn't go anywhere. So you wanted to see Tesla? Which one did you want to see?
Yeah, I'm looking at the.
Tesla's going to be bigger.
Yeah, I'm looking at 250 calls on November 8th right now, and I'm seeing 1170.
Yeah, November the 8th. Yeah, 10,
What's-
yeah, 10, 11 bucks, and then it's
what,
12,
5%,
yeah.
something like that.
So it's 12. Yeah, it's like $23. So it's like 10%.
Oh, 10%.
Again,
Yeah. Oh,
again,
23
you
bucks.
have another
the
2
two,
weeks
yeah.
of movement.
Okay.
Maybe there's still some digest. It's going to come in a bit because right now he's maybe still digesting the move even from today.
Mhm.
But yeah, you're basically looking at a 10% move here in Tesla, which is a lot more than 3% on SPY.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. That's still not as much as I'd expect. Like, this trade isn't as. I'm going to look at the puts now.
250s are about 10. Yeah, $10.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right. So George is considering putting on some options trades while we're.
George is long the
Yeah,
straddle.
I know. No, I mean,
You know what's the worst?
Like,
You want a straddle
honestly-
story? Do you want a
Yeah.
straddle story?
yeah,
for it?
please, because
Love a good
I
strategy.
Okay.
never do as well as I think I'm going to do.
No, I
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
Straddle, and I've always
We
been
did
of the opinion, you know what? Straddle buyers never win. Straddle
Yeah.
buyers never win. And I'm like, I used to just sell straddles. And I remember I did them. This is like maybe 5 years ago on Apple. And Apple was trading at like 525. It was like, pre-split and everything. And I'm like, the implied move, I was getting 25 points for the straddle. I'm like, 5% here. I'm like, I'm taking it. I'm like, there's no way it'll be fine. So I'm like, so I write the straddle, write the calls and the puts, and the announcement comes out, and it's good, and the stock starts popping, and then they announce a stock buyback, and I'm like, oh god, that's not good. And then they announce a stock split, and I'm like, okay, that's really bad. It was like a 7-for-1 stock split. I'm like, okay, now I'm in a world of hurt. And the stock opens up the next day like 580. Here I was, 25 max gain, and now it's blown out over twice that. And I was like, oh, this is just how I like such a bad taste. So straddle rating works until it doesn't. But when it doesn't work, it really sucks when it doesn't work. You're taking in 5, taking in 10, and then one goes out 50, and you're like, I just lost like the last 10 of them on one trade. So, I mean, that's straddles.
My biggest issue with straddles is the emotional turmoil that I go through when I'm wondering when I should exit one of the losing leg.
Yeah,
basically.
the losing leg.
The losing leg, and it's almost always too late. Like, that's my straddle story. It's like it's almost always too like threading that needle. It's almost always too late or too early. Like, and it ends up going the other way. And I was like, oh, this is the whole point that like, you know, this volatility is the whole point of why you straddled it, George. Good job. Like,
All right, so let's go. I like this question. Here's a very specific question. What effect on markets do you see increased tariffs will have? So let's say that's, you know, Trump wins. He's been very clear about what he plans to do with tariffs, and I have to admit here that being sort of someone who is classically educated in economics, you know, the idea has always simply been that the cost of the tariff get passed on the consumer, and it's a tax that consumers pay. That being said, there's been some really interesting work looking at the tariffs that he did pass in his first administration and the ones that were continued in the Biden administration that have shown, interestingly, that while that is true in the short term, in the intermediate term, some of those effects do get competed away as you have potentially domestic production increase as a result of the tariff. So I have to admit that I don't think I'm like in this crazy camp of tariff everything, you know, I mean, I haven't seen very much in terms of plan specificity other than we're going to raise $1 trillion through tariffs, which sounds completely unreasonable to me. But I will say I'm not as sort of bearish on tariffs as I might have been a few years ago before some of these studies came out. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anything?
I mean, for me, the big thing is that I'm worried about the short term. Like, I think we already have like a lot of strains on debt, consumer spending. Like, you know, if there's something that's worrying in our economy, like that we could put our fingers on, other than just like broad, you know, international debt levels or what have you. Like, if you're looking at ours, right? I think you have to look at consumer spending, consumer debt levels, and this categorically would not help that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I worry about with tariffs, and I do, you know, I think I've probably read some of the same research as you. What I do worry about also is will there be US manufacturing? Like, if you're talking about like the kind of like, you know, base level, you know, goods, like just to say like toys that come from China, right? Are there going to be toy factories that sprout up? Like, what is the spread there between the tariffs and how much profit would need to happen for this to be realistic in the US to have those businesses start funding themselves or getting built? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's as straightforward as thinking that we will replace a lot of that domestically. So while I do agree that theoretically in the intermediate term, we could catch up, I'm not sure if the we as America is actually going to build that kind of manufacturing here again. And we might just, I mean, which by the way is fine. We might just end up buying from another country, you know, and not China, who ends up building the manufacturing. And at that point, you know, if the goal is to just make us less dependent on China, maybe it'll do that. But is it worth the short-term pain of straining consumer spending more? I don't think I can get on board with that.
That's a great point. Yeah. Are people ready for an inflation redux in the face of tariffs?
And so this brings us to the question here. Let's just talk China, you know, because most of the goods come from China. Let's talk China stocks. Do they get? Are we going to put China in the Harris camp? Like, China stocks want to see Harris come in because Trump's maybe going to be harder. So I mean, if we're categorizing stocks here, which is a good exercise to do, I would probably put China in the Harris pile, where I think if Trump gets in, he's obviously talked a lot tougher. I think both administrations want to be tougher, but I think it's going to be more extreme action probably under a Trump administration. So maybe you want to be hedging your Tesla along with some BABA or something like that on the other side of it, because
I was like thinking about that. I was like, I can't manage the risk in that trade. Like, when I just ran those, I like PDD, and I was like, how would that trade work out? PDD, Tesla, like, I was thinking like, I kind of like that, but also just like the number of risks involved in this, because there's also, and we talked about this last time, so I won't go into the whole thing. There's also the contested election risk of China pulling something contested election, like
Yeah.
looks like Kamala's going to win, and China pulls something with Taiwan in the U.S. chaos, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like a pure, which of course would hurt all China stocks, like immediately, and like chip stocks, among others.
Probably all
I think
stocks.
chip stocks
That's-
overall
stocks.
are some of the
Yeah.
more risky things, because the tariffs would hurt chip stocks, contested election would hurt chip stocks. So I actually think maybe the best pure trade is shorting chips into the election. But I'm not really like an exposed shorter like that. That would involve I can never wrap my head around shorting anything that involves like Nvidia or Taiwan Semi or whatever,
Scary.
just because I love those
Yeah.
companies
Right.
so
Yeah.
much. It's hard to
Yeah.
be like, no matter how much the macro picture says that that's the right thing to do, I just have a very tough time being like, I'm going to short chips. But like purely, I think if you look at all the outcomes, there's a lot of outcomes that could affect U.S. and Taiwanese chip stocks.
Yeah. Fascinating. All right. I can't wait to reconvene in a month.
There's going to be a lot happens in the next month. We'll say
A
that.
lot.
That's a safe thing to say.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going out and buying straddles on the SPY, but there's a lot of things that we're going to be able to talk about 1 month from now.
I think
I'm
our
gonna
next
look more
one
at
is
this
going to be interesting.
at this PDD or BABA Tesla trade though.
Okay.
Maybe shorting
Those stocks
chips.
are going to move.
I think there's maybe something there
All right.
in that jumble.
Let us know what you come up with. We'll tweet it out and or post it on Urban Finance. And
He's buying 100 right now, so I'm
Yeah,
going George. You let me know what I come up
exactly.
with. I'm going George.
Yeah, I
Let me-
gotta
all
get
right.
crypto in there somewhere.
Real quick, one last question: are you rooting for the Dodgers, the Yankees, or a meteor strike?
Call him
I mean, I'm a
C.
Yankees fan. I'm born and raised in New York. Yankees,
God.
Yankees all the way. Actually,
All right.
one of my first really good memories of growing up was staying up late with my dad and watching the 1996 championship. And I
Nice.
mean, it's funny because when you have sports, you don't really necessarily know, but I did know how important that was to my dad, who had obviously gone through, the kind of the Yankee dark ages, and on the other side. And then I've gotten to go through my own Yankee dark ages, 15 years since we've been in the series.
Yeah.
So I'm psyched.
As a
Go
Phillies
Yankees.
fan, I mostly just know dark ages.
Yeah.
So
Tigers is the same. Tigers
Yeah.
is the same. We had a little excitement
Oh man,
there for a bit this year.
I'm
but-
sorry for you guys. Yeah.
But we got
All right.
Lions. I got the
Yeah.
Lions on the
you
other
got
side.
the
here,
Lions,
too,
right?
so-
There you
Yeah.
go.
The Lions look good.
All
They
right.
look-
Thanks,
they look-
guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening in. Again, we've been talking a lot about it. You might have heard about it. There's an election coming. Register to vote. It's very important. And I will tell you, take a look at this website called uniteamerica.org. There are ballot initiatives in 7 different states, I believe, to reform the primary process and to really try to end the extreme polarization that has resulted from these extremist primaries. It's a really nonpartisan issue. It's something everyone should want. It means open primaries. It means the top 4 who get through actually, end up in the general election. It means, a totally different dynamic. And it would be really good for the country. So check those out. Maybe it's in one of your states and you can learn more about those issues. But we'll talk again pretty soon, and we'll be on the other side. Thanks, Dennis. Thanks, George. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
All right.